The evening light filters through my bedroom window, casting a somber hue upon the photograph from my first communion that I am rearranging. Today, I turn 72, and it seems as if all those 72 years were spent just so I could gather enough courage for this moment. My name is Grace M. Peterson, and this is my confession. I invite you, whoever you are, to sit here with me amidst the sound of the drizzling rain outside. They say rain is a blessing, but mine came only after a tempest that ravaged my life for years. This is not merely a story being retold. It is the story of deep scars on the soul, of a faith exploited to sow terror, and of a life that felt as though it had been stolen. Keep an open heart, because the story I am about to tell may bring you pain, just as it has tormented me for over half a century. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because some truths need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. Some stories, no matter how painful, must be told. I grew up in a humble clay house with a dirt floor and a thatched roof. We were poor in possessions but rich in the affection of my mother, Mrs. Eleanor, a hard-working woman who washed clothes to support the four of me 3 brothers and me. Oh, my father, Mr. Anthony was a man who claimed to be God-fearing. At least that's what he'd say when he slammed his fist on the table demanding silence, or when he forcefully raised his belt. He who spares the rod hates his son, he would repeat like a dogma, while we cowered in fear. My mother would bow her head, submissive as a frightened bird. God is watching everything, she would whisper to us when he went to drink at Sonny's Tavern. In our town, the church was very important. Father Joseph was almost a saint to everyone. His words were law. He was a serious man with a gaze that seemed to see all the sins hidden deep within one's soul. I was 19 when everything changed. I had just met John, the pharmacist's son, a handsome boy with a charming smile who played the guitar at the town festivals. When he looked at me, I felt a pleasant warmth. A sin, perhaps, but a sin so sweet it was impossible to resist. One night at a summer church picnic, John asked me to dance. Naively, I accepted. We danced closely, smelling each other's perfume, his hands on my waist. That was all, I swear to God, just a dance. But it was enough for Tony, the priest's nephew, to see us and spread the gossip that I was throwing myself at the boy. The rumor spread like wildfire. When I got home, my father was already waiting for me, his eyes full of rage. "You've dishonored the family," he shouted, while my mother cried in silence. "Now there's only one way to restore our honor." The next day, Father Joseph came to our house personally. He sat at the kitchen table, accepting the coffee my mother offered with trembling hands. "Grace has a calling," he declared with divine grace. "God is calling her." I didn't understand anything. A calling? What calling? I just wanted to be a teacher, get married, have children. I wanted to feel that warmth John gave me again. There is a convent in St. Jude's Abbey, in rural Montana. The Sisters of Divine Providence will receive Grace there. There she will find God's path and purify her soul. My father accepted immediately. My mother cried silently but said nothing. Who was she to contradict the divine will? Incomprehensible to my 19-year-old self, which contrasted with my own insignificance, a simple girl from the countryside. "Pack your things." My father's order was laconic, definitive, and it echoed in my mind long after he'd spoken. "You're leaving next week." That dark night, I cried until I was exhausted. I hugged Rosie, my rag doll, a gift from my mother since my childhood, tightly. The idea of leaving terrified me, abandoning my dreams and my town to become a nun. It was Aunt Clara, the neighborhood midwife and herbalist, knowledgeable about herbs and stars, who comforted me. "My child," she said with the wisdom of years, "sometimes we have to follow a river we didn't choose to reach the sea that belongs to us. Keep that in your heart." The evening before my painful departure, I secretly met with John in our hiding spot behind the church. He took my hands, his eyes tearful. "I'll wait for you, Grace, no matter how long it takes." How much innocence in those words. Our youth believed in the simplicity of the world, where desire was enough to make dreams come true. The journey was long and exhausting. 3 days in a pickup truck, shaking over dirt roads, followed by 2 days on a noisy train. I had never left Promise Creek. Every new landscape was new and frightening. I carried with me only a small bundle of simple clothes, the miraculous medal, a gift from my mother, and a wooden rosary, a legacy from my grandmother. When I arrived at St. Jude's Abbey, my soul was already shrunken with fear. The city was bigger than mine, the Yellowstone River more imposing than the Tennessee, and the convent seemed like an impregnable fortress with its high walls and narrow windows. Sister Angelica received me at the door, a tall, thin woman with a long face and skin as pale as paper. She appeared to be in her 50s, but the weight of life had aged her. She was the Mother Superior, the highest authority in that place. "Welcome to the house of God," she said without a smile. "Here you will learn discipline, obedience, and fear of the Lord." That first day, they took me to a small room where my hair, once long and black, which John had liked so much, was cut to the scalp. The locks fell to the floor like dry autumn leaves. Then they took my clothes, bathed me in cold water, and dressed me in a rough, itchy habit. "From today," they announced, "you are no longer Grace from Promise Creek. You are Sister Mary of Divine Obedience." That dark night, lying on a hard mattress in a cold, dark cell, I cried silently, afraid they would hear me. I hugged my aching body and tried to remember the warmth of my home, the smell of my mother's homemade bread, John's smile. I fought not to forget who I really was. The days in the convent repeated in a monotonous routine, like beads on an infinite rosary. We woke at 4 a.m. to the clang of the bell, prayed on our knees on the icy floor for an hour, then cleaned the convent in absolute silence. "A closed mouth catches no flies," Sister Angelica would repeat whenever someone dared to whisper. Breakfast consisted of a piece of stale bread and a glass of watered-down milk. More prayers followed, work in the garden, catechism classes, sewing always in silence, always with our heads bowed. At night, more prayers, and finally, rest, hungry and cold. There were 27 other novices in the convent, girls like me, with empty gazes, resigned, with hesitant and trembling hands. Some, as young as 15 or 16, hid silenced histories. The past was a forbidden territory, sealed under constant threat. "The outside world is dead to you," the words of the burly Father Anselm resonated, a man with small eyes who came to the convent every week to hear our confessions. It was in the 3rd week of confinement that I met Rose. I was assigned to laundry duty with her, and amidst the steam and the scent of harsh soap, her gaze radiated an unusual liveliness, a sharp attention, as if her mind were always busy with thoughts others didn't understand. Once, while I was cleaning the hallway, she passed by me and discreetly dropped a small piece of paper. "Be careful what you say in confession," the message read, written in a shaky hand. I was very surprised. Why such caution? Isn't confession supposed to be a sacred act, a ritual to purify the soul? Slowly, I began to understand what Rose meant. In my next confession, I told Father Anselm how much I missed my family. The next day, I was called to the Mother Superior's office. To my surprise, she knew everything I had said in confession. "Missing your family is the work of the devil," she declared, raising a wooden ruler. "We are going to eradicate this evil from your being." Obediently, I extended my hands as the other novices did. 10 painful strikes on each palm. I bit my lips hard, trying not to scream. "Give thanks for this correction," the mother ordered. "It is for the good of your soul." With a trembling voice and tears in my eyes, I replied, "Thank you, Mother." It was in that moment that I realized this place they called the house of God was actually a prison disguised as sanctity. And I was a prisoner, having done nothing wrong, serving a sentence for being young, for having danced with a boy, for having dreams. At night, lying in my cell, I would hear the muffled sobs in the pillows. I was not the only one suffering. All of us there shared the same pain, the same destiny imposed against our will by fathers, priests, or a false calling that none of us truly felt. Rose began to seek me out in secret. We would meet quickly, in hiding, almost always when we were cleaning the chapel. She had been in the convent for 3 years. She came from a small town in the Appalachians, Kentucky. Her father sent her there when he discovered she wanted to study medicine. "This place is not of God, Grace," she would whisper. "I've seen terrible things." That day, we were interrupted. Sister Agnes caught us talking and we were punished. We spent 2 hours kneeling on kernels of corn, praying the rosary non-stop. Almost a month after that punishment, on a stormy night, I saw something I will never forget. I couldn't sleep because of the thunder. Suddenly, I heard footsteps in the hallway, doors opening carefully. I peeked through the crack in my door and saw Father Anselm enter the cell of a novice named Teresa. Behind him, Sister Agnes, holding a candle, watched the hallway. The next morning, Teresa didn't come to prayers. I asked Sister Carmen, the oldest of the nuns, what had happened to her. But she avoided my gaze and told me in a low voice, "Some trials are harder than others. Pray for her." Rose confirmed my suspicions. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened. There was a system of silence and complicity that protected the abusers and punished the victims. "If we speak, no one will believe us," Rose explained. "We are women, we are novices, they are God's representatives on earth." I felt a great anguish, a rage I had never felt before. Rage against my father, who sent me to that hell, against the church in my town, under the command of the priest, a dark place that imprisoned women, subjecting them to abuse in the name of a twisted faith. One night, hidden in the pantry, I asked Rose, "How are we going to escape from here?" "I don't know how yet," she answered with a determined look, "but we'll figure it out. Trust me." The months passed very slowly in that oppressive environment. I learned to survive. I bowed my head, obeyed without question, prayed aloud, and confessed invented sins that harmed no one. But inside, the flame of the grace I once was still burned the girl from Promise Creek who wanted to be a teacher, who loved the beauty of the river, and who danced freely with John. One night, while helping in the kitchen, I overheard a conversation between Sister Agnes and Sister Angelica. They were talking about an upcoming inspection with the arrival of important bishops from Helena the following week. "We have to hide the problems," Sister Angelica was saying. "Teresa still has visible marks, and Lucy refuses to eat." The cruel solution they proposed was to lock them in the basement until the bishop's visit was over. The basement. I had never heard of a basement in that convent. When I told Rose, her eyes lit up with hope. She had already heard rumors about the basement. It was said to be under the chapel and was used to lock up the young women who tried to escape or who were unwell after what the priest did to them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about Teresa, Lucy, and the other girls locked in the darkness of the basement. I thought about John, wondering if he still remembered me. I thought about my mother, imagining if she too cried every night as I did. "We will find a solution," Rose promised, squeezing my hand tightly the next day. "God helps those who help themselves. And I don't mean their God, but the true God who loves and frees, not the one who imprisons and punishes." The eve of the bishop's arrival, the convent was in chaos. Everyone was cleaning and polishing every corner. Mother Angelica, more nervous than a cat on a hot tin roof, was shouting orders at everyone. It was in that chaos that Rose and I saw our opportunity. We were sent to clean the chapel where the bishops would hold Mass the next day. While the other novices arranged the pews and the altar, we pretended to be cleaning, but our eyes were searching for clues to the basement. "There," Rose whispered, pointing to a small, almost invisible door behind the confessional. "I've been watching that door for a while. I've never seen anyone go in or out of it in broad daylight." We waited for the right moment. When Sister Agnes went to get more wax, and the other novices were cleaning the stained glass windows, we approached the door in silence. It was locked, of course, but Rose, cunning as ever, already had a hairpin hidden in the fold of her habit. "I learned this from my brother," she confided as she worked the hairpin in the lock. "He used it to open the pantry at home when we wanted to steal sweets." After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, the door gave way with a faint click. Our hearts were pounding so hard we feared the sound would give away our audacity. Behind the door, a dark, damp, stone staircase descended into what could only be the infamous basement. "Let's come back later," Rose pondered cautiously. That night, when the convent fell into the silence of sleep, we could barely touch our food, consumed by tension and expectation. Apprehension dominated me as I recited the evening prayers, a rosary of Hail Marys uttered without real thought, my mind absorbed in the possible consequences of our actions. "What if they catch us?" I murmured to Rose as we returned to our quarters. "The punishment will be severe." "We can't remain idle," she countered, her gaze filled with determination. "We'll never get out of here, and those young women downstairs will continue to suffer." We waited until midnight, when the convent was plunged into an almost palpable silence. Only the howling of the wind against the windows and the occasional muffled sob from a distant cell disturbed the quiet. Barefoot, to avoid making noise, we left our rooms and met in the hallway. The darkness was dense, but Rose carried a small candle. We walked in slow steps, whispering sincere prayers, imploring for protection not to the nuns or the priests, but to a divine force, if it still listened. We reached the chapel without incident. The moonlight, filtering through the colorful stained glass windows, cast dancing shapes on the floor. A tremor ran through me, a mixture of dread and cold. "Let's go," Rose said, taking my hand. Together, we headed to the small door. This time, the makeshift key wasn't necessary. The lock had been left open. A narrow spiral staircase was revealed. A strong smell of mold permeated the air, mixed with an indefinable odor. We descended cautiously, the flickering flame of the candle casting sinister shadows on the stone walls. The basement was larger than I had imagined, with a long corridor flanked by several wooden doors. It resembled a prison, not a convent. "Teresa? Lucy? Is anyone there?" Rose called out in a low voice. A faint groan emanated from one of the cells. We ran to it. A small barred window allowed a glimpse inside, a tiny, windowless cubicle with only a thin mattress on the floor. On it, a huddled young woman. It was Teresa, looking smaller and thinner than I remembered, with deep dark circles under her eyes. "We've come to help," I declared, while Rose tried to open the door with the hairpin. "It's no use," Teresa replied, her voice barely audible. "They're taking us away early tomorrow, before the bishops arrive. We'll be transferred to the convent in Billings until the visit is over." "Who else is here?" Rose inquired, examining the other cells. "Lucy is in the cell next door, and also Joanna, the one who tried to escape last month. She's been here longer. She doesn't talk anymore, only cries." It was a desolate scene. 3 young women imprisoned like animals, punished for not enduring the abuse or for daring to seek freedom. And the worst part was the certainty that this was just a fraction of a grim reality. How many others had suffered there before? How many had been sent to other convents, silenced forever? "We have to do something," I exclaimed, with tears streaming down my face. "We can't leave them here." At that moment, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Someone was descending. Rose quickly blew out the candle and pulled me behind some wine barrels in the corner of the basement. It was Sister Agnes, with a lamp, followed by Father Anselm. Motionless, hidden in the shadows, we trembled with fear. "The bishops arrive at 8, said the priest. "Make sure they are far from here by then, and try to improve their appearance. I don't want any questions." "Yes, Father," replied the nun. The 2 of them went into a room at the end of the corridor, leaving the door slightly ajar, which allowed their conversation to be overheard. "The newcomer, Grace?" the priest inquired about my behavior. I felt a chill hearing my name. Rose squeezed my hand firmly. "She still shows inner rebellion," replied Sister Agnes. "But she is in the process of learning. Rose, on the other hand, worries me. She seems to have the devil in her blood, always questioning with those defiant eyes. After the visit, I will take care of both of them," the priest concluded, in a tone that sent shivers down my spine. "I have effective methods, even for the most resistant ones." You didn't need to be a genius to understand his intentions. Rose and I exchanged glances in the darkness, with the same thought in mind. We needed to escape from there as quickly as possible. We waited for the 2 of them to leave, which seemed like an eternity. When silence finally returned, Rose relit the candle. "They will take you at 5 in the morning," I informed Teresa through the small window in the door. "And we'll be back tomorrow night?" she questioned with an exhausted voice. "Is it always like this?" Rose replied, "Not if you escape." She retorted, "How, if we're locked in here? And even if we manage to get out, where would we go? We have no money, and we don't know anyone in the city." Rose remained silent for a moment, lost in thought. Then her face lit up with that determined smile I already knew. "I have a plan," she announced, "but we'll need help." We returned to our room before our absence was noted. Lying on my uncomfortable bed, I couldn't sleep. The images of the basement, of the imprisoned girls, the priest's voice talking about usury things swirled in my mind. The next morning, the bishops arrived promptly at 8 o'clock. They were 3 men dressed in purple cassocks with serious and imposing faces. The entire convent was lined up in the courtyard to receive them, all with heads bowed, hands clasped in prayer. Mother Angelica was smiling as I had never seen her before. Suddenly, she seemed like a saint, a welcoming and gentle woman. What a flawless performance. "Our novices are examples of devotion," she claimed as she introduced us to the bishops. "They live in prayer and work, following in the footsteps of Our Lady." I felt a strong urge to reveal the truth right there, in front of everyone. But I knew no one would believe me. It would be my word against theirs. Throughout the day, the bishops toured the convent, visiting the chapel, the refectory, and even the garden. Obviously, the basement was not included in the tour, and no mention was made of the young women who had been taken away before dawn. That night, exhausted from keeping up the charade, I found Rose in the laundry room. We were alone, soaking the sheets. "What about the plan?" I asked in a low voice. "I'm working on it," she replied. "Remember Sister Constance, who works in the kitchen? She's not like the others. I've seen her crying and hiding several times. I think she was also forced to come here." I inquired, "Do you think she will help us?" "There's only one way to find out." The next day, after the bishops had departed, everything returned to the usual routine. The girls from the basement were brought back, but we had no contact with them. We learned they were under spiritual punishment, isolated in their cells for a week, feeding only on bread and water. Rose managed to talk to Sister Constance. As she suspected, the older nun also concealed her own deep sufferings and secrets. As a young woman, she had been sent to the convent after the tragic loss of her fiancé in combat. The family, immersed in religious fervor, interpreted the event as a divine designation for the young woman's monastic life. "No one should remain here against their will," the nun declared, her voice choked with emotion, her eyes tearful. "This is not the service of God that is expected." Sharing the same conviction, the older nun offered her help. Employed as a cook, she had easy access to the pantry and, crucially, to the keys of the back gate where they received food supplies. "In 3 days," she revealed, "a truck will arrive with provisions. Mr. Cecil, the vegetable supplier, is a trustworthy man. He can take you to Livingston, where you'll find the bus to Denver." This presented itself as the opportunity to escape, but they couldn't do it alone. "We need to rescue the girls from the basement," I insisted. "We can't abandon them to their fate." Sister Constance expressed concern, shaking her head. "The task will become more complex. They are locked up under constant surveillance, and more people increase the risk of being discovered." Rose, with unshakable resolve, replied, "One for all, and all for one. Either we escape together, or none of us leaves." The plan was inherently fraught with danger. On the eve of the supply delivery, Sister Constance planned to add a mild sedative to the other nuns' tea, enough to induce a deep sleep but without causing harm. Then, she would use the keys to open the basement and free the young women from their cells. The meeting point would be the back gate at 4 a.m, the scheduled time for Mr. Cecil's arrival with the truck. During the 2 days leading up to the action, we cautiously gathered everything we could: some leftover bread taken from meals, fruit harvested from the garden, and a change of clothes for each of us, washed and hidden with diligence. It was little, but it represented everything we possessed. On the crucial night, anxiety prevented me from sleeping. Every noise, however small, startled me. The thought of the plan failing, of being discovered, terrified me. Worse than physical punishment was the prospect of remaining there, imprisoned forever. At 3 in the morning, I got up in absolute silence. Under my habit, I wore the common clothes I had saved, a simple skirt and blouse I wore when I arrived. I took the small bundle with bread and fruit and waited. Rose appeared at my door as planned. "Everything is ready," she whispered. "Let's go." We descended the corridor, submerged in darkness, with our hearts pounding. We passed in front of the Mother Superior's cell. It was possible to hear her snoring through the door. The sedative had worked. We found Sister Constance at the entrance to the basement. She had already freed the 3 young women, who appeared scared and disoriented but determined to escape. "May God protect you," the nun said, blessing each of us with the sign of the cross. "Stay in the shadows, daughters." She guided us through the corridors to the back gate. With every step, I feared someone would wake up, that an alarm would sound, that we would be captured. But nothing happened. Mr. Cecil was already waiting outside with the truck, covered by a tarp. Without uttering a word, he helped us get in and covered us with straw and empty sacks. "Stay still until we are far away," he whispered. "A police patrol usually passes by the main highway." The truck began to move slowly. I heard the creak of the gate closing, then the soft rumble of the engine on the dirt road. We were free. After a 1.5 years in that prison disguised as a convent, I was in a confined space, under the rustic protection of the straw, between Rose and Teresa. I felt the warm flow of tears running down my face. Those were not emanations of dread or melancholy, but of pure relief and the promise of a liberated future that was dawning within me. The journey to Livingston took 4 precious hours. We got out of the truck under the faint light of dawn, our limbs stiff, bodies exhausted, but with the lightness of hope in our hearts. "This is my niece, Victoria," Mr. Cecil announced to the bus station attendant, gesturing towards me. "And her friends. They are going to visit an aunt in Denver." The woman, absorbed in counting the bills Mr. Cecil handed her, barely gave us a second glance. He had sacrificed part of his vegetable harvest to buy our tickets. "God bless you," I murmured, squeezing his calloused hands. "He is already blessing me, my child," he replied with a smile that revealed the absence of some teeth. "My younger sister was also taken to a convent when she was young. We never saw her again. They said she succumbed to a fever, but we know the truth, don't we? They never even let us see her body." On the bus to Denver, at 5 in the morning, Rose, Teresa, Lucy, Joanna, and I settled together in the back seats. For the first time in a long time, we enjoyed the freedom to talk openly, without the fear of being heard or punished. Each one shared her particular story. Teresa had been sent to the convent by her stepfather, who wanted to get rid of her after her mother's death. Lucy, at 15, had become pregnant, and her family, to hide the supposed scandal, confined her in the convent. The child was brutally taken from her right after birth and given up for adoption. Joanna, for her part, had been caught reading books considered subversive, which dealt with women's rights. Different narratives, but with a common denominator. Young women imprisoned, silenced, and violated, all in the name of a supposed devotion. "Where will we go now?" inquired Lucy, the youngest among us, at just 17. None of us had an answer. None of us had a family that would welcome us with open arms. None of us had financial resources or a safe place to shelter. "We will go to Atlanta," decreed Rose, always the most resolute. "It's a metropolis. It offers more opportunities. We can find work or stay together for a while." "What if they look for us?" questioned Joanna, still visibly frightened. "The police help them, not us." "Then we will change our names," Rose replied with unshakable determination. "We will start over. It's not the first time women have needed to disappear to survive." The bus tore through the countryside, kicking up trails of reddish dust on the highway. I contemplated the landscape through the window. The vast open plains giving way to rolling hills, the sky a blue I had never seen before, and rivers winding like silver ribbons below. I reflected on everything that had happened, on the metamorphosis my life had undergone since that summer church picnic in Promise Creek. "Do you know what I long to do when we get to Atlanta?" I said, breaking the silence that hung in the air. "I want to cut my hair very short, however I want, and then let it grow back, simply because I have the right to do so." The girls laughed, a genuine laugh that echoed through the almost empty bus. "I crave a big plate of meatloaf with green beans and potatoes," Lucy confessed, her eyes closing as if she could already taste it. "Real food." "I want to sleep in late," sighed Teresa, "without the ringing of the bell, without imposed prayers." "I want to learn to read properly," declared Joanna, "and later record everything that happened in that place so that it is never forgotten." Rose took my hand and smiled, a smile that always gave me courage. "I want us to never feel fear again," she proclaimed. "Learn to free yourself with the truth." Those words resonated deeply, signaling the true beginning of my journey. At 21, despite the feeling of a life lived in vain, I glimpsed a new horizon. Although family, hometown, and first love had been lost, I had conquered something invaluable: courage, the support of friendship, and an unwavering determination. Above all, I found my own voice. As the bus moved down the highway, every mile increased the distance between us and the convent walls. The future in Atlanta was uncertain, as was the destiny of my life. However, a certainty affirmed itself within me. I would never allow them to silence me again. I would never again be a prisoner. "Life is like a river," my Aunt Clara used to say. "It may face rocks and unexpected curves, but the water will always find its way to the sea." And I, Grace M. Peterson, was finally charting my own course, following the current of my particular river. Atlanta welcomed us with the typical indifference of large cities, where newcomers get lost in the crowd, a concrete jungle where eye contact was rare, contrasting sharply with the welcoming Promise Creek. We disembarked at the bus terminal, 5 disoriented young women, clutching improvised bundles, desperately seeking a direction. The money generously donated by Mr. Cecil barely covered the tickets, leaving us without resources for breakfast. "And now what?" inquired Teresa, hugging herself as if seeking protection. Rose, our eternal fortress, pointed towards a distant church. "Let's go there. Churches usually help those in need." I hesitated. Churches were the last thing I wanted to see, but we had no other options. The Church of St. Martin de Porres was located in a bustling square. A mass was just ending as we arrived. We waited outside until the faithful dispersed, and the priest appeared at the door. Father Jerome was unlike the religious figures we knew, a man in his 60s, with tousled white hair, glasses slipping down his nose, and a welcoming smile on his round face. His cassock, worn by time, appeared decades old. "How can I help you, my daughters?" he asked, seeing us standing there. Rose took the lead and crafted a superficial narrative. We were young women from the countryside, looking for work in the capital, with nowhere to stay. The convent, the escape, and the abuses remained a secret. Some truths are too heavy to be shared with strangers, even those wearing clerical collars. The priest observed us for a moment, as if reading between the lines of our words. Then he sighed. "Come with me. I don't have much to offer, but what little I have, I will gladly share." He led us to the parish house, a modest building behind the church. There, a black woman with gray hair was preparing lunch. "Mrs. Miller," the priest called, "we have visitors. Could you add 5 more plates to the table?" The woman examined us meticulously, noticing our unusual clothes, still wearing pieces from the convent under the few common garments we possessed, our frightened demeanor, and the downcast gazes the convent had taught us to maintain. She murmured, placing her hands on her hips. "These girls look like they're running from something." Rose instinctively recoiled, ready to flee, while my heart contracted with apprehension. Contrary to my expectations, Mrs. Miller showed a welcoming smile, revealing a gap between her front teeth. "Whatever troubles you, it's behind you now. Here, we don't question the past, only the future," she affirmed gently. "Make yourselves comfortable. I'm going to prepare some invigorating coffee for you before lunch. You're so weak, you make me feel sorry for you." That coffee turned out to be the most delicious I had ever tasted. We savored homemade bread, still warm, with butter melting on it, cornbread, and real coffee with milk. We ate with an almost desperate fervor, as if we were compensating for a long period of deprivation. I believe Mrs. Miller had never witnessed such need. "The parish house doesn't have room to accommodate you," the priest declared at the end of the meal. "However, I know someone who can offer help. Mrs. Matilda, a widow who lives nearby, runs a boarding house for young people from the countryside who come looking for work in the city. It's a simple place, but safe and clean." After lunch, consisting of meatloaf, beans, potatoes, and salad that awakened in us a deep nostalgia for homemade food, the priest accompanied us to Mrs. Matilda's boarding house. It was a spacious old residence, adorned with a front garden full of roses and a yard where chickens scratched freely. Mrs. Matilda, a short, robust woman in her 60s, had sharp eyes that seemed to scrutinize the soul. "5 at once, Father Jerome," she exclaimed, laughing when she saw us. "Are you planning to turn my house into a convent?" The mention of the word convent startled me, while Joanna turned pale. Was she aware of our secret? Had the priest revealed our story? "They are good girls, Mrs. Matilda," the priest assured her. "They need shelter and a job opportunity. I immediately thought of you." Mrs. Matilda examined us for a few moments, before sketching a smile. "I have 3 rooms available, 2 with 2 beds each and 1 with a single. You can have all 3. "Thank you. That would be perfect," Rose quickly replied. "We need to support each other, and it would be best if we could stay close." After the priest left, Mrs. Matilda showed us the rooms. They were modest, equipped with 2 beds, a wardrobe, and a small table. However, compared to the convent cells, they seemed like hotel suites. "The rules are simple," she explained. "No men in here, no alcoholic beverages, no mess. Breakfast is served at 6. If you miss it, you don't get lunch. Dinner is at 7. If you're late, you'll eat cold. The rent must be paid on the 5th, no exceptions." She paused, directing her gaze at each of us. "I'm not interested in where you came from or why you're here. This is a place to start over." That night, lying in a soft bed for the first time in almost 2 years, I cried silently. They were not tears of sadness, but of relief. We were distant, protected, and united. The next day, we began our job search. The task proved arduous. None of us had experience beyond praying, cleaning, and obeying. We had no documents, letters of recommendation, or any resources. "There's a sewing factory nearby," Mrs. Matilda suggested when we returned, defeated, at the end of the day. "Mrs. Henderson is my friend. I'll talk to her." The next morning, at 5, we headed to the factory. It was a large warehouse where several women worked at sewing machines, making clothes for local trade. Mrs. Clotilde, an austere woman of few words, evaluated us with suspicion. "Do you know how to sew?" she asked. "Yes," we replied in unison. In truth, the convent routine had us incessantly sewing, consuming hours of each day making items for hospitals and children's coats. "Show me what you know," Clotilde ordered, gesturing towards the idle sewing machines in the back of the warehouse. Each of us took our post. The characteristic noise of the machines, the smell of the fabric, the cyclical and repetitive movement, it all evoked vivid memories of the work in the convent, transporting me back to that environment for a moment. However, observing the other women around, absorbed in conversations, discreet laughter, and even soft songs, the reality of my freedom was reaffirmed. Mrs. Clotilde evaluated our production with a critical and demanding eye. "Not bad," she finally conceded. "I can hire you. Payment will be by the piece at the end of each week." And so our new journey began in Atlanta. Our routine at the sewing factory extended from 7 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. The work was demanding, but the atmosphere was welcoming and relaxed. The other seamstresses were simple women, many also from the countryside, each carrying her own stories of struggle and overcoming. At the end of the first week, we received our first salary. The amount was not expressive, but it represented an achievement. It was money earned through our own effort, which we could use freely. "Let's buy new clothes," Teresa suggested, radiating enthusiasm. "I can't stand wearing the convent pieces underneath anymore." We went to the municipal market and acquired modest, second-hand clothes, but they were ours. Each one selected something that reflected a bit of her essence, or the person she longed to be. I opted for a light, flowing blue dress that reminded me of the hue of the Tennessee River. Gradually, we adapted to the dynamics of the big city. We learned to use public transport, to negotiate prices at the fairs, to deal with stares and quips in the streets. On Sundays, we attended Mass at Father Jerome's church, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude, and also because his divine message was different from what we knew. He preached a God of love, not of punishment, a God who welcomed, not who punished. In his homilies, he emphasized that true sin does not lie in loving or questioning, but in inflicting suffering on others, in using God's name to oppress. In one of those masses, we met Mr. August, a retired teacher who taught night classes for literacy at the church. Rose, always the boldest, asked if we could participate. "Certainly," he replied with a welcoming smile. "Education is a fundamental right, especially for those who were denied that opportunity." So, after months dedicated to sewing during the day, we began to dedicate our nights to learning. Letters, numbers, history, geography, the world unfolded before us like a flower in full bloom. "I want to get my GED," Rose announced one day after class. "And then I want to go to college." "College?" Lucy exclaimed, amidst laughter. "That's too ambitious a dream for us." "Who says?" Rose retorted, her eyes shining intensely. "We are as capable as anyone else, we just didn't have the opportunity." That longing began to germinate in me too. I remembered the time when I wanted to be a teacher, before everything changed. Why not pursue that goal now? A year had passed since our escape. We managed to save some money, improve our quality of life. We left Mrs. Matilda's boarding house and rented a small house on the outskirts of the city, Joanna, Rose, and I. Lucy had found a boyfriend, a gentle boy who worked in a bakery and went to live with his family. Teresa decided to return to her hometown, in another state, after re-establishing contact with an aunt who promised to support her. Our house was modest, but it represented our home. We maintained a garden, a refuge where we cultivated aromatic herbs and colorful flowers. We enjoyed freedom. We found peace amidst the tranquility. However, the shadows of the past persisted in haunting our thoughts. At night, I was sometimes awakened by silent screams, tormented by nightmares that transported me back to the gloomy basement, the cruel punishments, and the oppressive voice of Father Anselm. Rose also faced her own nocturnal ghosts, while Joanna remained withdrawn, rarely expressing herself, and startling at unexpected noises. "We need to confront what we experienced," Rose declared on a serene evening as we shared coffee on the porch. "Not just among ourselves, but reveal it to the world." "Who would believe us?" I replied, feeling the ancestral fear reignite. "We are just 3 women, devoid of formal education, without reputation or family ties." "We are no longer just 3, Rose countered with conviction. "Now we are 5, and there are others who escaped before us, others who still remain imprisoned there." Rose was right. In the night classes, we met Margaret, a woman who had also been sent to a convent during her youth. Through her, we learned of more womentuo, 3, countless all sharing frighteningly similar stories. "It's a system," Rose explained vehemently. "Families send girls considered problematic to the convents. Priests and nuns shamelessly abuse their power, and everything remains covered up because nobody gives credit to the victims." It was during this period that we met Dr. Paul, a lawyer who offered free legal assistance at the parish once a week. He listened to our story with full attention, without interrupting, without questioning its veracity. "It's a complex case," he pondered after hearing us out. "You are aware of that. The church holds immense power. And without concrete evidence." "We have the names," Joanna interrupted, expressing a rare firmness. "We have the dates, the scars on our bodies and in our souls. And we are not alone," Rose added. "We can locate other victims. We can return to St. Jude's, talk to Mr. Cecil, to Sister Constance, if she is still there." The lawyer stroked his graying beard, thoughtful. "It will be an arduous battle. You will face reprisals, defamation, discredit. Are you prepared for that?" I looked at Rose, then at Joanna. The three of us had been through hell and emerged as survivors. What could be worse? We were born prepared, I replied with determination. We just weren't aware of it until now. The following months were dedicated to intense preparation. Dr. Paul helped us collect testimonies from other victims. We located 7 women who had been through the convent of the Sisters of Divine Providence at different times, all with incredibly similar accounts. Margaret introduced us to Robert, a journalist from the Atlanta Journal who had already investigated cases of abuse in the church. He showed interest in our story. "I can't guarantee it will be published," he said frankly. "My editor fears lawsuits, but I'll do my best." Meanwhile, we continued with our lives. I managed to enroll in the GED program and studied at night after work. Rose, always ambitious, was already planning to take the entrance exam for law school. Joanna discovered a talent for painting, creating pictures that portrayed our experience in the convent, striking images of bars, shadows, and hands outstretched for help. I made a decision. "I want to go back to Promise Creek," I announced one night after dinner. Rose looked at me, surprised. "Are you sure? Your family?" "I'm not going back to my family," I explained. "I'm going back to look for John. He deserves to know what happened to me, and I need to know what happened to him." My decision was made. With the money I had saved over 2 years, I bought a bus ticket to Promise Creek. The journey would be long, 2 days on the road with several connections. On the eve of my return, I was surprised by an unexpected gift. Joanna gave me a canvas she had created especially for me. The image portrayed a woman from behind, contemplating a blue river under a vast open sky. "It's you," she confided softly, "returning to your river, but heading towards your future." The journey back was like revisiting my life in reverse. Each city, each landscape, awakened memories, some laden with sorrow, others full of tenderness. When I finally saw the banks of the Tennessee River, my heart accelerated. Promise Creek remained practically unchanged since my departure 3 years earlier. The same dirt roads, the same modest dwellings, the same imposing church on top of the hill. However, I had undergone transformations. The innocent young woman who danced with John at the summer picnic no longer existed. I settled into a simple guest house in the center of town. The owner, a lady named Mrs. Appleton, didn't recognize me, and why would she? I was just one among the countless pilgrims who visited the city for devotion to the shrine. The next day, I set out in search of John. His father's pharmacy was still there, but it bore a new sign, New Hope Pharmacy. Owner, Dr. John P. Santos. My heart almost stopped. John had finished his studies in pharmacy, realizing his dream, and was back in his hometown. I entered the establishment with trembling legs. Behind the counter, a man with his back to me was arranging medicines on a shelf. When he turned around, I almost didn't recognize him. John was taller, stronger, wearing glasses that gave him a serious look. But the smile was the same one that had captivated me years ago. "Can I help?" he began, interrupting himself when he saw me. His eyes widened, his mouth agape. "Grace," he murmured, as if he were seeing a ghost. "Grace M. Peterson." Words failed me, and I just felt the tears flooding my eyes. "My God, Grace, it's really you." He came around the counter, stopping in front of me, hesitant to touch me, as if I might disappear at any moment. "Everyone said you had entered a convent. Later they spread rumors that you had died." "I almost did die," I finally replied, my voice choked up. "But I'm here." John closed the pharmacy that day. We went to a cafe on the riverbank where I shared my entire journey. He listened attentively, his eyes sometimes tearful, his hands squeezing mine. "I looked for you," he said at the end of my narrative. "I went to the convent in St. Jude's, but they said there was no novice with your name there. Your father forbade anyone from mentioning your name. Your mother fell ill with sadness." "My mother," I murmured, feeling an old pain resurface. "How is she?" "She passed away last year," John said softly. "Pneumonia, they said, but I think it was from sadness. Your father is still the same, still goes to church on Sundays." still slams the table demanding respect. A wave of guilt washed over me, cold and sharp. I had been angry with her for her silence, for her submission. But now, all I felt was a profound sorrow for the woman who had loved me in the only way she knew how, a woman whose heart had broken in a silence I could now understand. I wept for the goodbyes I never said, and for the quiet strength I had failed to see. I allowed myself to cry for my mother, from whom I couldn't say goodbye, for what we could have been, for what we lost. "And you?" I finally asked, drying my tears. "I see you've realized your dream." John smiled, that smile I had kept in my memory, like a precious treasure. "I graduated in New Orleans. I came back a year ago when my father decided to retire. But I never forgot you, Grace." That afternoon, we walked along the riverbank like two old friends reuniting. John shared details of his life, his studies, and ambitions. In return, I told him about Atlanta, my friends, and our tireless battle for justice. "I want to help," he declared with conviction. "The suffering inflicted on you and the others cannot go unpunished. It's risky. We are confronting influential individuals." "That's all the more reason not to abandon you in this fight," he replied, holding my hand firmly. I stayed in Promise Creek for 7 days. I didn't seek contact with my father or my brothers. Some relationships, once broken, become irreparable. However, I reconnected with Aunt Clara, who shed tears seeing me alive, and some childhood friends who welcomed me with warm hugs. John and I grew close again, with the caution of those who recognize that time and experiences have changed us. We were no longer the passionate youths of yesteryear, but perhaps we could build something new, something erected on more consistent foundations than a youthful fantasy. Upon returning to Atlanta, I carried with me a promise. John would come to visit me in 3 months. And also a conviction. My past was overcome. It was time to face the future. Robert, the journalist, managed to publish our narrative in the Atlanta Journal. Not with our real names, for precaution, but with enough details for those who knew to identify the convent and the people involved. The report triggered a small turmoil. There were official denials from the church, naturally, letters from readers outraged by the slander against the institution. But there were also expressions of support, especially from other women. And crucially, other victims came forward. Women who had experienced similar situations in other convents, in other cities, in other times. It was as if we had opened a door that had been closed for centuries. "It's just the beginning," Rose pondered, cutting out the report to save. "Now they know we are not alone, that we will no longer remain silent. My fight for justice continues, but now I have something more to fight for, my future." With Mr. August's help, I got a position as an assistant in an elementary school. I wasn't the teacher I aspired to be yet, but I was on my way. John came to visit as promised. He met my friends, saw our modest home, and understood the new life I had built. "I'm proud of you," he said on the eve of his return to Promise Creek. "After all you've endured, you still have the strength to fight, to build, to support others. The strength that resides in us remains unknown until the moment we are tested," I replied, remembering Aunt Clara's words. 3 years have passed since our escape from the convent. Rose was attending law school, studying at night and working during the day. Joanna had opened a small painting studio and taught classes to underprivileged children. I had completed my GED and started a teaching course. Our battle against the convent progressed slowly in the judicial system. And John had moved to Atlanta, bringing his knowledge of pharmacy and his generous heart. We were building something together, day by day, with the serenity of one who knows that the best foundations are built with time and care. One Sunday afternoon, we received an unexpected visit. A young woman of about 16 appeared at our door, trembling, frightened, clutching a yellowed newspaper clipping the report on our story. "Help me," she pleaded in a faint voice. "I just escaped from the convent in Billings." The young woman, visibly disturbed, couldn't finish her sentence, breaking down in tears. Rose, with maternal swiftness, wrapped her in a welcoming hug, conveying safety and unconditional support. "You're safe now. Rose assured her with a firm and comforting voice. "We're here for you. You're not alone anymore." In that instant, looking at that girl, I revisited my own past, the image of myself 3 years earlier. I saw in her eyes the same paralyzing fear, the same lacerating pain, but I also glimpsed the flame of courage, the audacity to take the first step towards liberation. I understood in that crucial moment that our journey was just beginning, that other girls, other stories, and other battles awaited us. The river of my existence had finally found its bed, its greater purpose. Approaching the young woman, I offered her a glass of water, a simple gesture of welcome and hope. "What's your name?" I asked with genuine interest. "Hope," she replied in an almost inaudible whisper. An involuntary smile blossomed on my lips. Life sometimes reveals a peculiar, almost divine sense of humor in its intrinsic irony. "Welcome, Hope," I declared, my heart overflowing with empathy. "I have a story to share with you." Hope was just the first of many. Soon after came Connie, a 17-year-old who escaped from the same convent in Billings. Then Antonia, a 22-year-old woman who endured 5 years of suffering in a convent in Denver. And in a continuous flow came Clara, Patricia, Agnesa, true procession of wounded souls seeking refuge, understanding, and above all, justice. Our modest house soon became too small to shelter so many stories and needs. With the generous help of John, who now worked in a large pharmacy in downtown Atlanta, we managed to rent a larger property on the outskirts of the city. A simple but spacious place, with a large yard and several rooms. We decided to name it Hope House, in honor of the first girl who sought us out, the symbol of our cause. "This is turning into a boarding house," joked Mrs. Miller, who had retired from her job with Father Jerome and now helped us in the Hope House kitchen. However, Hope House was not a simple boarding house. It was a safe haven, a starting point for a new life, a place where women who had experienced the same suffering could heal and start over, rebuilding their dreams and hopes. Rose, already in her second year of law school, idealized and coordinated a support group. Once a week, we would meet in the large living room of Hope House, sitting in a circle. Each one shared her story, her deepest pains, her paralyzing fears, but also her achievements, however small they might seem. I managed to walk down the street without looking at the ground. One of them would recount with a gleam of overcoming in her eyes. I spoke in a loud voice in the presence of a man. Another would say with renewed pride, "I prayed today, but because I wanted to, not because they forced me." A third would reveal with newfound freedom. They were small but crucial steps. Each victory was celebrated with warm applause, tight hugs, and sometimes tears of joy and relief. Our battle against the convent of St. Jude's advanced slowly in the labyrinthine judicial system. Dr. Paul, the lawyer who had supported us from the beginning, now had the support of 4 pro bono lawyers, all his former students who fervently believed in our cause. We faced relentless resistance, of course. The church vehemently denied all accusations. The accused priests and nuns were transferred to other cities, other states, in an attempt to stifle the scandal. Some witnesses mysteriously disappeared, silenced by fear or by dark forces. Documents proving our passage through the convent were lost in convenient fires, a desperate maneuver to destroy the evidence. "It's David against Goliath," Dr. Paul would sigh, with a mix of concern and determination. "But remember, in the story, David won." Rose, always radiant with optimism, would add, "And this time, David is not alone. We are many, united by a common purpose." Gradually, more reports about the case emerged in newspapers across the country. Robert, the journalist who originally published our story, now worked for a national newspaper, further amplifying our voice. Our struggle gained visibility and resonance. We received emotional letters of support, generous donations, and offers of help from people from all corners. However, we were also the target of constant threats. Anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night, letters with death threats, and hostile stares from people on the street who recognized us from the photos in the newspapers. Whenever I felt apprehensive, John would assure me, "I am your safe harbor." Fear, for me, was an indication that we were challenging influential figures. Hope House transcended the mere function of physical shelter. We developed an informal learning space where the sheltered young women could study and prepare for life beyond our walls. Joanna taught art classes, Rose discussed fundamental rights, and I dedicated myself to teaching English and mathematics. John, for his part, shared his knowledge of first aid and basic health. We also had the help of volunteers who gave courses in sewing, cooking, and computing. It was Father Jerome who suggested that we formalize our work, registering the house as a non-profit association. This will give you more legitimacy, protection, and access to resources, he explained. And so, the Mary Liberator Association was born, a name that the young women we sheltered themselves chose by vote. The choice was not a tribute to me, but to the other Mary, the mother of Jesus, who for many of them represented the feminine and welcoming side of God, an image that had been lost among the traumatic experiences in the convents. By that time, I was already teaching at a public school. I had finished my teaching studies and passed the state exam. The salary wasn't much, but it was a dignified job that gave me great satisfaction. Teaching children to read, write, and above all, to question, was my way of ensuring that the new generation would not repeat the mistakes of the past. John and I got married in a simple ceremony in the gardens of Hope House. We decided not to do it in a church because none of us liked entering a temple without feeling a shiver. It was Mr. August, the teacher who taught us to read, who officiated the secular ceremony, full of poetry and music. Under the open sky and before the present witnesses, he said, "Do you promise to build a life based on respect, affection, and freedom?" "We promise," we replied in unison, holding hands, surrounded by our chosen family, Rose, Joanna, the girls from Hope House, Father Jerome, Mrs. Miller, Dr. Paul, Robertall, who had walked this path with us. In moments of joy, it's easy to believe that all is well and that problems are behind us. But life goes on, with its ups and downs. A week after our wedding, we were surprised by disheartening news. The judge had dismissed the lawsuit we had filed against the convent of the Sisters of Divine Providence, citing a lack of concrete evidence. Years of dedication, statements, testimonies, and documents gathered with so much effort were discarded just like that. Rose was deeply affected. It was her first major setback as a future lawyer. "How can they?" she asked, her eyes full of tears, clenching her fists on the table. "How can they ignore so many voices?" Dr. Paul and Robert tried to explain the legal subtleties, the political influences, and the secret agreements, but the truth was simple: the powerful protect the powerful. "It's not over," I affirmed that night during an urgent meeting at Hope House. "This is just one battle, not the war." "And what battle can we win?" asked Antonia, one of the young women we had sheltered, with bitterness in her voice. "They have everything: money, power, influence. We have nothing." I looked carefully at these women who had survived hell and returned to tell their stories, who had rebuilt their shattered lives like someone assembling a puzzle without knowing what the final picture would be. "We have something they will never have," I replied with a conviction that came from my soul. "We have the truth, and we have each other." That same night, we decided to change our strategy. If the judicial system refused to listen to us, we would make the rest of the world know our cause. We then planned to organize, after publishing a book, to expand our work by planning a powerful documentary and giving talks in schools and universities. We wanted to build a solid support network for victims of religious abuse, so large that no one could ignore it. Robert, the journalist who helped us, contacted an independent publisher who was interested in publishing a book that told our experiences. The book was called Voices of Silence. Each chapter told the story of one of the group's members, talking not only about what happened in the convent, but also about the difficult path to recovery and regaining their dignity. We dedicated months to writing the book. Remembering certain moments and writing about experiences we could barely put into words was very painful, but it was also a liberating act, like draining an old wound so it could finally heal. The book came out 14 years after our escape. Although it didn't become a bestseller or sell in major bookstores, it did circulate in universities, feminist groups, and human rights organizations. Although it didn't become a bestseller or sell in major bookstores, it did circulate in universities, feminist groups, and human rights organizations. It was cited in theses, discussed in seminars, and most importantly, it reached the hands of other women who had been through similar situations. They were women who believed they were alone, carrying the pain in silence for decades, thinking that no one would understand or believe their stories. Hope House began to receive letters from all over the United States. Some were simple notes with messages like, "I went through that too. Thank you for making me feel less alone." Others were long letters full of confessions, telling stories they had kept secret for 20, 30, or even 40 years. One of those letters was the one that changed everything. It was written by a lady from New Orleans, Louisiana, who had been a novice in the convent of the Sisters of Divine Providence in the 1960s. Her name was Martha, and she had something we didn't: concrete evidence. When she escaped from the convent in 1968, she took the diary of the Mother Superior from that time. In it were detailed records of the special disciplines applied to the novices considered rebellious, including physical punishments and isolation. It also mentioned the nocturnal visits of the confessors, with dates, names, and even evaluations of the young women. Martha kept the diary for almost 20 years, not knowing what to do with it. She didn't trust the police, the church, or the system. "When I read your book," she wrote, "I knew I had found the right people to entrust this material to." Rose traveled to New Orleans to retrieve the diary. She returned a week later, with dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep, but with a determined look. "It's all true," she confirmed, showing the black-covered notebook worn by time. "And it's worse than we imagined. It wasn't just a few priests and nuns abusing their power. It was an organized system, with records, evaluations, and strategic transfers of victims and abusers." With that evidence, Dr. Paul filed a new lawsuit, this time not against a particular convent, but against the archdiocese responsible for it. It was a bigger, more complicated case, but also harder to hide or ignore. The news spread like wildfire. Robert published a front-page report in the newspaper with edited fragments of the diary, protecting the victims' identities but exposing the culprits. Other media outlets picked up the story. A television network became interested in doing a special report. "They're scared," commented Rose, who was now in her final year of law school. "Scared that more people like Martha will appear, with more diaries and more evidence." The threats became stronger. Stones were thrown at the windows of Hope House. John's car was vandalized. The fear grew. Unsettling phone calls, revealing that they knew where our families lived, worried us greatly. "Perhaps it would be prudent for us to take a break," John suggested, concerned, especially about my pregnancy with our first child. "At least until the baby is born." I reflected on his proposal for days, my hand on my growing belly, feeling the gentle movements of my future son or daughter, whose gender we preferred to keep a secret until the moment of birth. The desire to protect that fragile and pure life was immense, but just as strong was my longing for him or her to grow up in a world where truth conquered power and where victims found the justice they deserved. "We are not giving up," I declared firmly. "We will take more precautions, of course. But to interrupt our work now would be a betrayal to all the women who have trusted us, who have shared their painful stories." Joanna, known for being reserved, had a brilliant idea: to turn her studio into an art gallery with works inspired by the stories from the book and the letters we received. "Art has a unique way of touching people that goes beyond words," she explained. The exhibition, Walls of Silence, opened at the Atlanta Cultural Center in September of 1986. Its power was undeniable, its impact profound and impossible to ignore. Paintings, sculptures, and art installations told stories of abuse, of forced silence, but also of brave resistance and rebirth. One work in particular caught everyone's attention: a huge mural in which each brick had the name of a woman who had suffered in abusive convents. We managed to gather more than 300 names from all over the country. "Each of these women is a brick in this wall of silence that we are tearing down," Joanna explained to the visitors with emotion. The event attracted national media attention. Journalists came from New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Progressive politicians showed their support. Human rights organizations offered to provide legal assistance. Finally, when the pressure became impossible to ignore, the Catholic Church issued an official statement announcing the formation of a commission to investigate the allegations against the Convent of the Sisters of Divine Providence and other similar institutions. "I don't trust them to investigate themselves," Rose grumbled, distrustful. "It's like asking the wolf to investigate the disappearance of the sheep." Her distrust was justified. The commission, formed mostly by conservative clerics, presented a report that admitted possible excesses in isolated cases, but flatly denied any systemic problem. The main accusations were dismissed as exaggerations or misunderstandings. "It's what we expected," sighed Dr. Paul, resigned. "But don't be discouraged. The judicial process continues, and now we have public opinion on our side." My son was born in July of 1987, on a sweltering summer night. A healthy boy with strong lungs who announced his arrival into the world with a powerful cry that echoed throughout the maternity ward. "He already knows how to make himself heard," John joked, his eyes full of tears as he held our son for the first time. We decided to name him Peter, which means rock, because he was born from the union of people who learned to be as strong as rocks, to resist the storms of life without breaking. Motherhood gave a new dimension to my life. Now, there was an even greater urgency in our struggle. It was not just about our past, but about his future, the world in which he would grow up. In the following months, between feedings and diaper changes, I remained involved in the case. Hope House now permanently housed 16 women and offered support to more than 50 women in vulnerable situations. Rose, now a licensed lawyer, had opened a small firm specializing in defending their rights. "Things are changing," she would say, rocking Peter while telling me about a new case they had accepted. "More judges are willing to listen, and more prosecutors are showing interest in investigating." The progress was slow, but real. In August of that year, unexpected news emerged. Father Anselm, the convent's confessor who had abused so many young women, was found dead in his home in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The authorities said he had committed suicide. Next to the body was a note that read, "I can no longer bear the burden of what I have done." The news stirred mixed feelings. We were not happy about anyone's death, not even an aggressor's. But we did feel that, in some way, the justice that had not been served in the courts had run its course. "He confessed," Joanna said, showing the newspaper with the headline. "Not how we wanted, but he confessed." Even more surprising was what happened next. Former residents, and even some nuns who were still in the convent, began to speak out. It was as if Father Anselm's death had broken the silence. Suddenly, everyone wanted to tell their story. Among them was Sister Constance, the older nun who helped us escape. She had been transferred to a convent in rural Louisiana after we left, but now she was returning publicly to confirm our story. "I can no longer remain silent," she declared in a moving interview on a major news network. "What happened in that convent, what happens in so many others, is not the work of God, but the fruit of human cruelty that uses God's name." Her testimony was crucial. As a nun of perpetual vows with more than 50 years of religious life, her words carried great weight inside and outside the church. Other religious figures, priests and nuns with more progressive ideas, also spoke out, calling for serious investigations, punishment for the guilty, and reparations for the victims. In October of 1987, 8 years after our escape, a new bishop took over the archdiocese that supervised the convent of the Sisters of Divine Providence. Don Mateo, a 60-year-old man with studies in liberation theology, was committed to human rights and social justice. One of his first actions was to order the closure of the convent. "This place no longer fulfills its original mission," he declared. "It will become a support center for victims of abuse and violence." Rose was invited to participate in the commission that would oversee the transformation of the convent. It was a symbolic and significant victory. The same institution that had imprisoned us now acknowledged our suffering and sought to make amends. The judicial process also advanced. The archdiocese proposed an out-of-court settlement, financial compensation for each identified victim, the creation of a fund to support women in vulnerable situations, and a commitment to implement mechanisms for prevention and reporting of abuse in all its institutions. It's not perfect, admitted Dr. Paul, but it's more than we would have achieved after years of legal battle. We held an assembly with all the victims we could contact. Some wanted to accept the agreement, already tired of fighting. Others preferred to continue to the end, seeking to have the guilty pay behind bars. After hours of debate, we reached an agreement. We would accept the settlement, but with an additional condition. The Archdiocese must finance the publication and free distribution of the book Voices of Silence to public libraries and schools throughout the country. If they agree to that, said one of the more experienced women in the assembly, we accept. The attitude would demonstrate a true desire for reparation, not just an attempt to cover up the scandal. To our surprise, Don Mateo accepted the demand without hesitation. It is essential that these stories be known, he declared, so that such atrocities are never repeated. The agreement was formalized in December of 1987. Obviously, this was not the end of the matter. Other convents and dioceses continued with similar practices, but it represented a beginning, a crack in a barrier that seemed impossible to break. With the compensation we received, John and I bought a modest but cozy house with a garden where Peter could play. Rose used the money to expand her law firm, which specialized in defending women's rights. Joanna invested in her studio, which was becoming increasingly known for its powerful and moving works. Hope House continued to operate, now with official support from the City of Atlanta and non-governmental organizations, serving as an example and inspiring similar initiatives in other places. The years passed. Peter grew up, becoming a curious and sensitive boy who always asked about the scars he saw in my soul. Little by little, I told him my story, according to what he could understand. "Why are some people so mean, Mom?" he asked me once, after learning about the convent. "It's not that simple, my son," I replied, searching for the right words. "Sometimes people do bad things because they were taught to believe it was right, or because no one stopped them. That's why we must raise our voices when we see something that isn't right. That's why your mom, Aunt Rose, and Aunt Joanna wrote that book." Peter understood that, and became a passionate defender of women's rights, despite his young age. At school, his teachers always commented that he did not tolerate bullying or injustice and how he defended the most vulnerable. In 1992, when Peter turned 5, I received an unexpected invitation. Georgia State University wanted me to give a lecture on my experience as part of a seminar on religious abuse in the United States. I had never spoken in public to so many people. My life had stabilized. I taught at a school, dedicated myself to my son, and helped with the administration of Hope House, but far from the spotlight. Rose was the one dedicated to that, with her legal work that was becoming increasingly recognized. "You have to accept," John insisted. "Your story has to be told by you, not just by the book or by others." On the day of the presentation, the auditorium was packed. Students, professors, journalists, and activists. When I went up to the stage, my legs were trembling and my mouth was dry. But I saw in the front row John and Peter smiling at me, and behind them Rose and Joanna, my companions on the journey, and beside them some of the women we had welcomed at Hope House over the years, now with their lives rebuilt. I took a deep breath and began. "My name is Grace M. Peterson. I was born in Promise Creek, Alabama, the daughter of Anthony and Eleanor. At 19, my dad sent me to a convent because I danced with a boy at a party. I spoke for almost 2 hours. I told everything: the fear, the pain, the abuses, the escape, the reconstruction, the fight for justice. I spoke without notes, without a script, just letting my story flow like the Tennessee River of my childhood. When I finished, there was a silence in the room. Little by little, the silence was broken, replaced by an explosion of applause that resonated in the place. It was not just applause, it was a sign of recognition. In the midst of that wave of emotions, I saw faces full of tears, while others nodded in a sign of unconditional support or respect. A university student with tear-filled eyes approached me at the end of the presentation. "My grandmother lived through something similar," she said with a trembling voice. "She never told the details, but now I understand better how much she suffered. Thank you for giving her a voice too. At that moment, I felt that something had changed in me. I understood that my path, although full of painful moments, had a power. The power to heal, to create true connections, and to drive change. From that day on, I accepted more invitations to share my story at universities, schools, and community centers. In 1995, when Peter turned 8, I received a special proposal to write a children's book that talked about topics like respect, consent, and how to identify situations of abuse. The book, called My Body, My Rules, came out the following year and was used by many schools, both public and private. Hope House continued to grow and help more people. What was once a temporary shelter for women escaping from abusive convents now received victims of different types of violence: domestic, religious, and institutional. We had a team of psychologists, social workers, lawyers, and educators dedicated to supporting women. Rose became one of the most famous lawyers in the area of women's rights in the entire country. Her experience led her to participate in the creation of laws to protect victims of abuse. Joanna, for her part, turned her studio into an art therapy school, giving women a safe place to express and process their traumas through art. And I continued to be a teacher, a mother, a wife, and the one who told a story that needed to be told over and over again, so that it would not be forgotten and so that it would not be repeated. 33 years after we escaped from the convent, I received an unexpected invitation to return to St. Jude's Abbey. The former convent of the Sisters of Divine Providence had been converted into a support center for women in vulnerable situations called the Sister Constance Center, in honor of the nun who helped us escape and who had died years before. I hesitated to accept the invitation. The idea of returning to that place brought back painful memories and old nightmares. But I saw the opportunity to close a cycle, to make peace with a past that, whether I liked it or not, had made me the person I was. "I'll go with you," John told me, my eternal support. "Me too," added Peter, now a young man of 18, tall and strong like his father, but with my curious and questioning eyes. The journey back to St. Jude's was like a trip back in time. The nearby town had changed, grown, and modernized, but some things remained the same. The Yellowstone River still flowed, the aspen trees bloomed, and the red earth still painted the streets. The old convent, however, was unrecognizable. The high walls had been torn down, replaced by a low fence and an always open gate. The once serious and formal garden was now full of colors and life. The dark chapel had been turned into a community library. I was received by Mariana, the center's coordinator, a strong woman in her 40s with a warm smile and intelligent eyes. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Peterson," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Your book changed my life. After reading it, I decided to dedicate my career to supporting women who had suffered abuse." Then, Mariana took me on a tour of the center. The former novices' cells were now comfortable rooms. The place that was once a refuge for women in danger had changed a lot. The old dining hall, where there had been silence, now echoed with the laughter of children playing while their mothers learned in training workshops. The basement, where there were sad memories, had been transformed into an art gallery where the works of Joanna and other artists told stories of suffering, resistance, and above all, overcoming. "We want people to know what happened here," Mariana explained. "Not to hold grudges or seek revenge, but to make sure these things don't happen again." On the last day of the visit, I participated in an important ceremony. A commemorative plaque would be placed at the entrance of the center, telling its story, from the violent convent to the current support center, honoring the women who had passed through there. Surprisingly, the plaque had all of our names: me, Rose, Joanna, Teresa, Lucy, and also Sister Constance, whose bravery had saved many lives. "These women taught us that true faith is liberating, not imprisoning," said the local bishop during the ceremony, stating that God's love is seen in dignity and freedom, not in fear and oppression. Seeing the plaque, the renovated building, the women and children who found refuge there, I felt something unexpected: peace. Not a peace that erases the past or ignores the pain, but a peace that comes from knowing that the struggle was worth it, that the scars show that we have healed. On the journey back to Atlanta, while the bus crossed the countryside, Peter asked me, "Mom, do you regret anything? Having told your story? Having fought so much?" I looked out the window, watching the sunset paint the sky red and gold. I remembered everything that had happened, the scars I still had, the nights I woke up scared, the moments I still flinched at a loud voice. But I also remembered the hundreds of women we had helped, the laws we had changed, the consciences we had awakened. I remembered my own journey, from the scared girl to the strong woman capable of telling her story without fear or shame. Finally, I replied, "No, I don't regret anything. Every step, even the most painful ones, brought me here. It brought me to you, to your father, to our friends, to our work. It brought me back to myself." 20 years have passed since that visit to St. Jude's. A day, at 72, I see Peter, now a man of 38, happy as a university history professor, married to a wonderful psychologist, and father to 2 precious girls who are the light of my eyes. John, my partner in so many battles, died 5 years ago after fighting cancer. I lost half of my heart, but I continue to live with the half that remains, which still beats strongly, which still has much to do. Hope House grew, becoming a network of support centers across the country. Oz, my fierce friend, now in her early 70s, continues to work as a lawyer and advisor on issues related to religious abuse. Joanna, also in her 70s, is dedicated to teaching her knowledge of art therapy to young therapists. And I continue to tell my story in schools, universities, community centers, to young people, adults, men, and women, because I believe in the power of stories to change, heal, and connect people. Recently, a young journalist asked me, "Mrs. Peterson, after all you've been through, do you still believe in God?" The confusion in her gaze made me smile. That's a common question, because many believe that painful experiences would have made me reject faith. "Yes, I believe," I replied, "but not in the petty, jealous, and punishing God I was taught to fear. I believe in a God of love, freedom, and justice. A God who is not locked up in churches, but is with those who suffer, who is saddened by pain and rejoices in liberation." The faith I found after leaving the convent is very different from the religious fear that marked my childhood. It's a faith that questions, that doubts, that changes. A faith that gives me the strength to keep fighting, even when my body is tired and my heart is sad. Today, sitting on the porch of my house, under the starry Atlanta sky, I remember all the women who shared their stories with me over the years. Their voices resonate in my memory like a powerful choir that death cannot silence. I also think of the girl I was in Promise Creek, the young woman who danced with John at the summer picnic, not knowing what would happen, the scared novice who prayed on her knees on the cold convent floor, the fugitive who trembled with fear and hope in that straw-filled truck, the teacher who found in education a way to be free. All those versions of me are still within my being, making me who I am now. Their scars are my medals, proof of a battle I didn't choose but learned to face with honor. This is my story, a story not only of pain, but of the courage that sprouts from ashes, of the friendship that becomes a life raft, and of a life once thought lost, only to be reclaimed with greater strength. My journey has taught me a precious lesson. Silence only protects the abuser, while a voice, however shaky at first, holds the power to connect broken souls and heal the deepest wounds. And now, I want to speak to you, whoever you are, listening to this story from anywhere in the world. Perhaps you too carry your own scars, your own heavy silences. Please know that you are not alone. Your voice deserves to be heard. Your story has power. Truth needs to be spread, even if it might shake someone's beliefs. If my story has touched you, I invite you to leave a comment. Every comment you share adds another voice to our chorus, showing that we are not alone in this fight. Please hit like so this message can reach others who need it, those who may feel lost, just as I once did. And please subscribe to the channel, because every story told is another brick building the wall of truth, and together, we can ignite a flame of hope from the ashes of the past. I am Grace M. Peterson, and this is my testimony to a faith that liberates, not imprisons. Thank you for listening.